This is the nightmare scenario for the Milwaukee Bucks, and unfortunately, it's come to fruition. Damian Lillard, the centerpiece of their hopes for a championship, has just suffered a torn Achilles in Game 4 against the Indiana Pacers. With the Bucks now down 3-1 in the series, it's all but certain that their season is over. But perhaps more devastatingly, this injury may signal the end of an era for the Bucks, an era that was built on the hopes of pairing Lillard with Giannis Antetokounmpo to create a championship-contending duo. Make no mistake, this injury to Lillard is as catastrophic as it gets for both him and the Bucks. At 35 years old, an Achilles tear is about as severe as an injury gets for a player at his stage in his career. Guards, in particular, are more vulnerable to this injury due to the explosive movement required to play their position, and Lillard's entire game is predicated on his quickness and ability to blow by defenders. While there have been examples of players recovering from Achilles injuries, Kevin Durant, for example, tore his Achilles in 2019 and returned to playing at a high level. Lillard is in a different situation. Durant was younger, still in his prime, and had the size and skill set to compensate for the loss of a step. Lillard, on the other hand, is a guard on the wrong side of 30, and coming back from this injury at nearly 37 years old doesn't seem realistic. The Dame that the Bucks traded for, the explosive, dynamic playmaker, is likely gone for good. The timing of this injury couldn't be worse. The Bucks were in a competitive playoff series, and while they struggled early on without Lillard, they fought back in Game 3. But now, with Lillard sidelined indefinitely, their chances of coming back in the series are slim to none. And more than that, this injury casts a dark shadow over the future of the franchise. Lillard is expected to be out for the rest of this year, and with recovery time likely pushing into next season, he may not see the court again until the 2026-27 season. For a team built around a championship window, that's a devastating blow. This injury doesn't just affect Lillard's future, it shakes the very foundation of the Bucks' championship aspirations. For years, their primary goal has been to keep Giannis happy and ensure that he stays in Milwaukee long-term. Giannis has never publicly expressed a desire to leave, but the Bucks knew that in order to keep him in town, they had to keep competing for titles. His best chance to stay was to build a team that could consistently contend for championships. And in recent years, Milwaukee has been willing to make big moves to ensure that. The Jrue Holiday trade in 2020 brought in a key piece that helped the team win the 2021 title. The trade for Lillard was another attempt to reignite their championship aspirations. But now, with Dame sidelined, the question must be asked, where does this leave Giannis? For years, the Bucks front office has made moves to keep the window open for a title. They traded for Lillard because they knew that the roster had stagnated and needed a spark. They even traded Chris Middleton midway through the season for Kyle Kuzma, a move intended to bolster the roster in a last-ditch effort to remain competitive. But now, with Lillard injured and the roster aging, the future looks bleak. The Bucks are in a situation where they can't realistically compete for a title. Lillard will be out for at least a full season, and with the team's cap tied up in aging veterans, there's no flexibility to make significant upgrades. They have no young assets to build around, and their current roster isn't good enough to contend. Even with Giannis, they are in a no-win situation. Yes, they have pieces like Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis, but none of that changes the fact that the team is aging, lacking depth, and facing a significant financial burden with Lillard's contract. At this point, Giannis is 30 years old. He's already won one MVP and one championship, but he wants more. And with the way things are shaping up in Milwaukee, there's little chance that the team can contend for titles in the immediate future. As much as the Bucks would love to convince him that they can still build a contender around him, they can't do so without major changes to the roster, and that's just not realistic at the moment. Looking at the roster, the idea of selling Giannis on the concept of staying in Milwaukee without Lillard for the next season or two feels impossible. There's no way to convince him that the Bucks are truly a contender unless you start that sentence with, "Once Dame comes back, but waiting for Lillard's return." And hoping that he can return to form after a major injury is a long shot at best. Giannis, who wants to win now, won't be content to sit and wait for a return to glory. He's already 30, and the window to win titles doesn't stay open forever. This injury also shines a spotlight on the failure of the Bucks front